time flies, whether we're having fun or not. Okay, so there are many, many sheets of paper with things on them for you to read and enjoy. However, maybe not during the sermon, because you can tell. And also, if you have your head down and are doing this during a sermon, don't be fooled into thinking that we don't know that you're looking at your phone. Because we know these things. It's sort of like your teachers when you're younger. They knew a lot of things, correct? Yes, okay. All right, in no apparent order, Saturday, December 28th is our Hanukkah party. It's a Saturday night. It's a potluck. And we will have a visit from Hanukkah Harriet, who has been on duty for the past couple of years. It's been great. She's very much better than her brother in many ways, and so her brother Hanukkah Harriet. But she's great. She's much more efficient, much more always thinking about others, and providing practical instructions for everyone, as you would expect, wouldn't you? Don't you think so, ladies? Yes. Yes, thank you. Also, if you have not signed up for the weekend retreat, which is over Martin Luther King holiday, you can do that in the foyer. There are many, many instructions about it. If you have questions, I was going to say you could ask Matt. I think he's here somewhere. Anyway, if you like to camp, it's a lot of fun. And actually for camp, the food isn't bad. And you're like outdoors, and it's January, so it's a lot cooler than it would be if you had to go there for summer camp like in August. That'd be more like a punishment. And now for your punishment, we're sending you to summer camp in the center of Florida because you've been naughty. So we go in January when it's much, much nicer. On this sheet, tomorrow, don't forget on the back of it, Saturday morning Shabbat services. We do have a Shabbat service tomorrow morning. It is much less formal, and you'll have it again on the 28th. Classes will start again, whether we want them to or no. Seminary classes will start again in the middle of January. I just taught my last class on Tuesday. Whether I wanted to or not, the dean said that I was teaching historical geography of the Bible, which I do love that class. I do love historical geography. It makes the Bible come alive in a different kind of way. If you like workbooks, I know that seems like so old-fashioned, workbooks. Remember workbooks? Remember how they pass them out to you, they're all thick, and they open up, and there were all these blank pages in it, right? And they even smell good. And you want to just fill in the blanks right away. How many of you did that one? Like me? No, just you, Patrice. You're the only one who ever liked workbooks. This is, you create your own map. You create your own atlas of maps of different stories in the Tanakh, and you learn a ton of things along the way. And the man who writes the guide about how you mark your maps, he really makes it, there's a lot of spiritual understanding in it, and he really shows you things and gives you lessons that encourage you along the way. So it isn't just, no, draw this, no, draw this, no, take a red pen and draw this. There's some of that, but there's also, now look at the map and let's look at what it's telling us and what we learn from the map. If that is of any interest to you, join us on Tuesday the 21st. And John is doing Messianic apologetics. He's not apologizing for being Messianic. He is giving instruction about how to answer questions that people always have for you. Over the holidays, maybe you already had some at Thanksgiving, somebody in your family or one of your neighbors said, well, why do you do this? Or why would you want to do that? Or didn't you like give up that when you believe in the Messiah? And if you didn't have an answer, if you were like going, blah, 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 and you were so happy when someone said, dessert, oh, dessert, then you probably need to come to the apologetics class. And the first several are free. If you just want to do a trial period, you're more than welcome to do that. And that's true about friends and neighbors who might want to come to any of those classes. Let me see. The blue boxes in the back are for your offerings, or our offerings. Once again, we haven't had to use the heat that much, thank God, so far, but you know, life goes on, and today has not been the happiest and nicest weather day that we've ever had, but the weather does affect the building, and the building, for those who actually work here, affects all of us too. And so don't forget that when you see people who need your money, that we also need your money. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. What else can I tell you? I don't have too much. John and I have been watching the 50th anniversary of Sesame Street, and we are not ashamed to say that. The first time I ever saw Sesame Street, I was in college, and I was in college, and I still wanted to turn it on because I had heard that it was really not just for children, that it was also for adults, that adults had a different level of fun and understanding about it, and that was totally true. And one summer I had to stay in Chicago for a job, that I had a job in the evening, so when I woke up in the morning, Sesame Street was on, and I turned it on, and I just laid in bed and watched Sesame Street and felt that I was pretty lucky to be alive, to have a job and to be able to lie in bed and watch Sesame Street. Ever since then, my kids also loved it, and actually we loved anything to do with the Muppets. We really enjoyed them. But the nice thing about Sesame Street, and especially the music, because one of my children got mad because they did not understand that when the hour was over, that Sesame Street went away on the TV, and there was nothing we could do to make Sesame Street come back, and it went on to some silly cartoon that they did not want to see, and so a lot of stuff, it was upsetting, and so when we finally figured out that if we bought the records, we bought the LPs of the Sesame Street music, then the next hour went much better. So when they were singing the older songs from Sesame Street, John and I were singing along. And it's nice to have those kinds of memories about something that really celebrates society. It celebrates growing up together, working together, and celebrates really being positive, having positive days and having positive times together and looking forward to those. And I thought, it's hard to find that overtly in our society anymore, and I'm very thankful for Sesame Street. And I'm not ashamed, I'm not too old to say that. So thank you for coming. Hopefully in our congregation we can be a third as nice and positive and helpful as they are on Sesame. That would be a high goal. And so, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob together as a community. Shabbat Shalom.
After that introduction, about all I can think of to say is cookie. I should also add, unfortunately these were hiding like there's something up front. For the celebrations of December, on the back table, if you don't have a copy, Lights of Hanukkah, and a guide to the Jewish, or died to was shown a celebration of the birth of the Jewish Messiah. So anyhow, those are on the back table. Feel free to take one and put it to good use as we move through this wonderful holiday period. But we're already part of a holiday. It's Shabbat. And Shabbat's a holiday as well. And on Shabbat, we were reminded that God has committed himself to us in that he's made us his people. And he's committed to being our God. Because of that, he is and has been and will continue to be a shield to our ancestors as well as to our ancestors' descendants. That's us. So join on pages 10 to 13 as we respond with Magen Avot.
Magen Avot vidvaro, Mekayem etim b'mamaro, El HaKadosh en gamohu, Hamaniach le'amo, B'yom Shabbat kadesho. Ivam ratzah laniach lahem, Lefnei na'avod be'yira v'avad, V'nodei lishmo b'chol yom. Tamid me'en habarachot, El ha'odaot, Adon ha'shalom, Makadesh ha'shabbat, U'mvarech sheli, U'maniach b'kedusha, Le'yamed u'shnei oneg, Zeher l'maseh v'reishit. Zeher l'maseh v'reishit. With his word he was a shield to our fathers. By his decree he will give life to the dead. The holy God, with whom no other can compare, who provides his people rest each holy Sabbath day. In reverence and awe we will serve him daily, and every day we will thank him suitably. He is the God to whom all thanks are due, the Lord of peace who makes the Sabbath special. He blesses the seventh day for his people, to give them joy and remind them of creation.
He blesses the seventh day for his people to give them joy and remind them of creation, as well as to reinforce the understanding that he is our God and we are his people. So as we light the Shabbat lights this evening, we reflect on that reality.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and has commanded us to light the candles for Sabbath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivanu Lehiyot or legoyim v'natan lanu Yeshua Meshachenu ha'or la'olam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and has given us and has commanded us to be a light to the nations and has given us Yeshua our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat shalom.
Our Tehillah Habrit Chadashah passage this evening is on the top of pages 1 136 and 137. As we each of us respond as individuals as well as together, we're reminded of the one who has, as he has promised, helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, as in fact he said to our ancestors. He has been, therefore, the shield of our people, and we are reminded of that yet again. And so we respond. The text starts this way: Romaman nafshi et Adonai et agel ruchi belohei yishi. Together, my soul praises the Lord,
and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but he has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, even as he said to our fathers.
and in having done all that for us, he has demonstrated that he is, as the text began, God, our Savior. The ultimate demonstration of that is when he entered into our history to secure for us the relationship with himself, as well as our destiny forever. Elohim Asher, pages 40 and 41, reminds us of that, as he, in fact, is the guarantee, because he sits in on one of the thrones, as the rabbis of old envisioned the Messiah would, and sits in the place of ultimate authority. So we respond on those pages, Elohim Asher.
Elohim asher diber, mikadem pe'amim rabot, uvidrakim rabot el havot beyad hanevi'im, diber aleinu be'acharit hayamim ha'ele, beyad ha'bein asher. Sam le'oresh kol, u'biado, gamasa et ha'olamim, u'zohar kevodo, v'tzelem atzmuto, v'noseh kol bidvaro, ra ha'gavura, u'lachar she'asa, tihur chatayim, yashav limin, hallelujah. In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets at many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
That last paragraph has set the stage for our continued response of gratitude, sometimes called praise, to our God for what he has done and for the way he acts towards us. Sephardi Kaddish picks up that same theme and also picks up a couple other themes. It anticipates the coming or the return of the Messiah, for which we also anticipate very strongly. And it also is an opportunity for those who may be remembering lost loved ones to remember, even in those kind of circumstances, that it's a good thing that we have a God who's gracious to us, and whose graciousness we can experience even in difficult times. So if you're remembering any such loved ones that are either family or friends, we invite you to do the traditional thing, which is to stand in response. Now, some of you may have heard that there was a couple that was gunned down in their kosher grocery store just a couple days ago in Jersey City. They're part of our extended family, all of our extended family, so yes, please rise as we acknowledge that they are part of our family, and we remind ourselves yet again, even in circumstances like this, we still have a gracious God. Pages 156 and 157.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמר הבא ויעלם דברך חירותה וימליך מלכותה ויצמח פורקנה וקרב משכה וקייכון וביומייכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל ועגל ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמרה לבורך לעולם עולם לעולם עולם מעולם היה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי לקודשה קריבו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה לאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רב מן שמיה וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומן הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו Amen. Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world which is created according to his will. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom and cause his salvation to sprout and bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and in your days and in the life of all the house of Israel, speedily, yes, soon, and say, Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and forever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded in the name of the Holy One, who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world, and say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven and good life for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen. He who makes peace in the heavenly realms, may he make peace for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen.
We remain standing but turn towards Jerusalem, the direction of the ark, as we respond with our Amida portion for this evening. It's paragraph 6, pages 76 to 79, as we continue to remind ourselves of the God who takes good care of us as his people. And therefore, as we acknowledge, not only is he our shield that saves through every generation, we are always in his keeping and get to experience his wonders and miracles daily, evening, morning, and noon. Use these words to express your gratitude to our God. Pages 76 to 79. You are truly the God of salvation and deliverance. Blessed are you, O Lord. Your name is good, and to you it is pleasant to give thanks. You may be seated. Our response continues on pages 42 and 43. First 4 paragraphs on those 2 pages. As we remind ourselves that the God of the world is our King, but he's also the Rock of Jacob, who is the shield of our salvation. We will do this responsively, as we usually do. I'll lead you through the opening line or two in Hebrew. Ask that you respond with the first paragraph. I get the second, you get the third. And I'll ask you to join with me on the fourth. Emet Elohei Olam Malkeinu Tzur Yaakov Magen Yeshenu. Can you respond?
It is true that the God of the world is our King. The Rock of Jacob is the shield of our salvation. From generation to generation he endures, and his name endures. And his throne is established, and his kingdom and his faithfulness forever endure.
And his word lives and endures. It's faithful and desirable forever. It's from everlasting to everlasting. For our ancestors and for us and for our children, in fact for our generations and for all generations of the seed of Israel, his servants.
The help of our fathers are you from ages past, a shield and a savior to their children after them in all generations and generations. In the heights of the world is your dwelling, and your judgments and your righteousness extend to the ends of the earth.
Happy together. Happy is the man who heeds your commandments, your Torah, and who places your word upon his heart. It is true that you are the Lord of your people, and mighty King to plead their case. It is true you are the first and the last, and besides you we have no King, Redeemer, and Savior. And having reflected on that, we're now reminded, or we remind ourselves, given what we've expressed thus far, the reality is this: Ein Kamoka. Truly, there is no God like you. That's pages 88 and 89.
Ein Kamoka Elohim Adonai, ve'ein k'ma'asecha. Malchut k'malchut kol olamim, u'memshalta bechol dor, bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imalot le'olam oed, Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
And as we stand before this great God, and we do so, facing Jerusalem yet again, in effect we add to the lines we just said, not just that the Lord reigns, or has reigned, and shall reign throughout eternity, but you as Lord will reign over the whole of my life. That's the intent of the Shema. That is what we respond with, pages 34 to 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Asher Elohim etzavcha hayom halevavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibartam, v'shivtecha bebetecha, u'lechtecha b'derech, u'sharpecha u'komecha, u'shartam leot al yadecha, ve'hayu letodakot beinecha, u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands, and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates.
That reality which we've just expressed will in fact be expressed throughout the world. As Vayi even so reminds us on pages 88 and 89, because that will be the time when from Zion shall go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem.
Vayhi binso Aaron vayomer Moshe, Kum Adonai vayafutzo evaka veyanusu mesaneka mipanecha. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Udavar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Le'amo Yisrael, Ikdushato. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel.
Having given to us the Torah, we recognize that what he gave to us is a tremendous treasure to which we need to respond. And we do, not only with the response on page 133, but with the response at the presentation of the Torah that's the insert in your bulletins.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside, the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words,
the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will
We hear your words.
and learn them, love them, and live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
All the Lord has said, we will do.
The Torah of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The teaching of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple.
Precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart.
The
The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes.
Happy is the one that walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful.
But our delight is in the Torah of the Lord, and in his Torah we will meditate day and night.
We shall be like a tree planted by streams of waters, that brings forth its fruit in its season.
And whose leaf does not wither, and in whatever we do, we shall prosper.
A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you.
For my ordinances which I command you are not too difficult for you, neither are they far off.
Do we make the Torah void through faith? Not at all. We establish Torah.
So then the Torah
is holy, and the commandment is holy, just and good.
That the righteous requirements of Torah might be fully met in us, who do not live according to our evil inclinations, but according to the Ruach Hashem.
The day will come when my Torah will flow from Zion,
And the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.
Yi shebarach Avotenu, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Rabbi John. May he bless Alex. May he bless Sharon. And may he bless Don, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families, and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMavorach. Baruch Adonai HaMavorach Olam Moed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim lefanav el Esav achiv artsa seir sedei Edom vayetzav otam lemor kotom rum ladonai le'esav. You may be seated. And so Jacob sent Malachim. Interesting. Usually translated messengers, the term for angels. You might say, why would anyone translate it angels?
Why would anybody translate?
Thank you. I'm glad that you asked. As it turns out, because if you remember the Parsha from just a week ago, angels went up and came down at the place where Jacob was staying. So Perhaps some of those stayed around so he could send them. Whether he sent angels or messengers, the point is this. He sent them to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, field of Edom. And he instructed them, saying, this is what you are to say, interesting phrasing, to my lord, small l, Esau. And then in the next instruction, or in the further instruction, he goes on to describe himself as Esau's servant. The point is he's sending his messengers to go to Esau, and he's coming to him from a perspective of respect and honor. And he wants Esau to understand that. The story unfolds. I'm not going to unfold it for you tonight, but I want you to understand, as the text is going to be read in just a moment, that as he did last week, God once again, pardon me, it wasn't last week that he did this, but it was in the portion that was from last week. God once again blesses Jacob. It's the second blessing. And he promises to him the covenant that he promised to his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac, as well as their wives. And all those covenant blessings now go through him. And through him and his descendants, then, the world will in fact be blessed. That's what God says. He repeats it here, just in case we missed it the first time around. So if you weren't here last week, God's telling you this week. So there you have it. But that's enough about the text for today. Pay attention to it as it is read in your hearing.
Genesis 15, 1 through 6. Sometime later, the word of Adonai came to Abram in a vision. Don't be afraid, Abram. I am your protector. Your reward will be very great. Abram replied, Adonai, God, what good will your gifts be to me if I continue childless? And Eliezer from Damascus inherits my possessions. You haven't given me a child, Abram continued, so someone born in my house will be my heir. But the word of Adonai came to him, this man will not be your heir. No, your heir will be a child from your own body. Then he brought him outside and said, look up in the sky and count the stars if you can count them. Your descendants will be that many. He believed Adonai, and he credited it to him as righteousness.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chaya olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
And no, you're not getting away without your reading. We insert a third reader at this point, and that is you. Look at your bulletin. On over the first inside page, you will read along with me that text, please. Are you ready? Here we go. Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim Lefanav El Esav Achiv Artsa Seir Sede Edom, Vayitzav Otam Le'mor Ko Tomum Ladonai Le'esav. And thank you for reinforcing the reading. And now, speaking of reinforcing, we're going to reinforce the reality that our ancestors experienced when they stood before God at Sinai and received these very words through the hand of Moses. And so we stand in their footsteps, so to speak, and we too respond with that reality. V'zot HaTorah. This is truly the Torah, given directly to us from God.
V'zot
HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated.
I'm reading Genesis 35, 9 through 15. After Jacob arrived from Padan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, but you will be called Jacob no longer. Your name will be Israel." Thus he named him Israel. God further said to him, "I am El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation, indeed a group of nations, will come from you. Kings will be descended from you. Moreover, the land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your descendants after you." Then God went up from him there where he had spoken with him. Jacob set up a standing stone in the place where he had spoken with him, a stone pillar. Then he poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. Jacob called the place where God spoke with him Beit El.
When God spoke to Jacob, when he spoke to Abraham, it dramatically altered his life. And these words are intended to dramatically alter our lives, taking deep root in us, as Etz Chaim reminds us on pages. I gave you the wrong pages for those who have Torah. That's okay. Pages 96 and 97. As we say to our God, so may these words change us, therefore renew our days as of old.
Es Chayim Hila Kazitima Vetom Kea Begusha Terachea Darkei Noam Lechom Tzivotea Hashivenu Adonai Elecha Bein Hashuva Kadesh Yameinu Kekedem Hashivenu Adonai Elecha Bein Hashuva Kadesh Yameinu Tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
And now, as his priest stood before him, so we stand before our God and respond with Uvnucho Yomar, pages 98 and 99.
Uvnucho Yomar, Shuba, Adonai Ribavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise,
Rise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return from your side.
Lord David Alexa, Al Teshev B'nai Meshika. Kila Kakto, Navatilachem, Orati Altazobu. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
As we greet one another here, feel free to do so in the pews. Feel free, I have to change out batteries. And I'm happy to see, by the way, that it's only 8:05. That gives me a lot of time to talk to you.
Actually, the clock's malfunctioning.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, we're live again. And somehow that sort of implies that we were dead before, and hence we are now resurrected. What can I say? We live in a society that frequently looks up to heroes. In fact, we're about to get introduced to a new one. I think it's this weekend. Baby Yoda. If you haven't figured that one out, see me afterwards, or somebody else who keeps abreast of major societal movements. The pages of Scripture, too, are packed full of heroes. Heroes who did spectacular things as a result of an encounter with God. An encounter with God that spurred them on to attempt the impossible. Now, on careful observation, though, these heroes were very human and quite inadequate people. But they had discovered that God's work, done by His power, produces His results. They learned the secret that bridged the chasm between what they were and what God had called them to do. They realized that which bridged that chasm was in fact faith. Now look, faith is risky. And it often isn't real faith without a risk. So God asked of these biblical heroes a willingness to risk. The greater the risk they were called to, the greater the power that He provided them with as a result of their faith and His faithfulness. Those who dared to take the risk Those who dared to take the risk in attempting the impossible, in fact, found the liberating truth that we all need for life's challenges. They discovered that our God is the Lord of the impossible, and he will provide. Abraham was a man who got to know and to trust the Lord of the impossible so well that God called him my friend, Isaiah 41. In fact, he's distinguished for the risks that he dared to take and for the repeated radical interventions of God in his life to provide exactly what he needed, all because he trusted God. His story, as we're going to tell it tonight, in brief, I've laid out for you in 3 acts. 3 acts. And you've got it in the insert. So you can follow along in the outline as we rapidly move through the passages that tell this story. The story of Abraham as he encountered the Lord of the impossible as the God who provides. Act 1, a call to faith and friendship. I know the story begins in Ur, but we want to really pick up his story in Haran. Now, in Genesis chapter 12, God appeared to Abraham directly. And you can imagine that when God appears to someone directly, that's going to produce a sense of awe and perhaps even panic. But, as we find out, God had great plans for Abraham. And he made great promises in the opening 3 verses. And these are the verses that form a foundational covenant, where God said he would give to Abraham the land, that he would make out of Abraham a great nation. In fact, that he would bless people and be the source of blessing for all the world. And as you look at that text, this all is stuff that he promised to provide. But based on verse 1, leaving security and stepping out, following God fully, is what this is all based on. And when we read the text a number of weeks ago, we noticed that the text began with Lech Lekai. Basically, it says, now go, now get going. But it has built into it for your benefit. And as you read this text, that's a lot of benefit. A nation and a people, a land, great blessing. Well, anyhow, God challenged him to do something. Something perhaps even somewhat frightening. God had made a tremendous promise, but acting on it required great risk, significant risk. And look, Abraham had nothing but the promise of God to go on. And so he went out and he began a lifelong adventure of trusting and following God. A friendship with the God of the impossible. And so he discovered him to be also the God who provides. But look, as we move through the story, his progress is not without risk and setbacks. And so when the second scene unfolds, we find him in Egypt toward the end of that chapter. And here Abraham showed his humanness, his shortcomings, and his inadequacy. He feared and he resisted risk. He didn't trust, he panicked. And so he presented to Pharaoh Sarah as his sister. Now there's a reality there, because they were related, and in some sense she was. But nevertheless, that wasn't the whole of the reality, and he left out an important part. But even here, God intervenes. The Lord provides. He alerted Pharaoh, and he showed that he was once again the God who provides, and he did so supernaturally in this case, in bringing Abraham out of a very risky situation. Now, many centuries later, another Jew found himself in a very difficult situation, and like Abraham, one somewhat of his own doing. Moshe, a Jewish actor, was so broke that he was ready to take on any gig, any acting gig that he could find. Finally, he got a lead, a classified ad that said, actor needed to play an ape. I could do that, Moshe thought. To his great surprise, the employer turned out to be the Central Park Zoo in New York. Owing to mismanagement, the zoo had spent so much money renovating the grounds and improving the habitat that they could no longer afford to import an ape to replace the one that was recently deceased. So until they could raise the money for the real thing, they decided to put an actor in an ape suit. Well, out of desperation, Moshe took the offer. At first, his conscience kept nagging at him that he was being dishonest by fooling the zoo-goers. And also, he felt somewhat indignified in the ape suit, being stared at by the crowds. But after a few days on the job, he got the hang of it. He began to enjoy all the attention and started to put on a show for all the zoo-goers. So Moshe hung upside down from the branches by his legs, swinging on the vines, climbing up the cage walls, and roaring with all his might while beating on his chest. Soon he drew a sizable crowd. One day when Moshe was swinging on the vines to show off to a group of school kids, his hand slipped, and he went flying over the fence into the neighboring enclosure, which happened to be where the lions were. Terrified, Moshe backed up as far as he could from the approaching lion. He covered his eyes with his paws, and he prayed at the top of his lungs, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. The lion stopped, opened his powerful jaws, and roared. Wait for it. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Elam Va'ed. And then suddenly from a nearby cage, a panda yelled, "Shut up, you fools, you get us all fired." Look, he does rescue us from some of the strange situations we managed to get ourselves into. And he did so for Abraham in this situation, and so Pharaoh graciously sent him on his way. That brings us to Act 2. It's the cultivation of faith and friendship. And in the first scene, God gives Abraham a reminder. It comes right after the story of Lot and Abraham and how they separate. And once again, the Lord appears to Abraham, and he reminds him of the promised blessing. And in fact, he shows him the land that he would provide as the God who provides. And then he has him walk through the land, reinforcing the reality of the promise. In order to build in Abraham the confidence of a risk taker, the Lord helps him claim the reality of the seemingly impossible, the land. And he gave him a vision, and then he made him walk through it. He made him walk through it until he could make it his own. Let me suggest that similarly, God gives us the impossible dream, so to speak. He helps us to envision what it will be like, and then helps us persistently focus on and build toward it until it becomes ours. Please take note of this, however. The dreams which are really from God are those that are directly related to his call on our lives and his purpose for us. And that's in keeping with what is promised in Psalm 37, verse 4, which says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Now, that does not mean that he will give you whatever's on your heart, but he will put his desires on your heart. And that's the source from which these rightful dreams come from. Scene 2, then, in chapter 14 is a reinforcement at a very interesting encounter. Here, a dude by the name of Melchizedek shows up. And he reinforces the promised blessings when he says to Abraham, "Blessed be Abraham by God." Then he describes God in an interesting way. Most High, a classic name of God. Also creator of heaven and earth. In other words, what this scene is here for is to remind Abraham that he could count on it. God, in fact, will provide, and Melchizedek recognized that and reminded Abraham of that. That brings us to scene 3. It's the ratification. And this is the central portion in this act. Abraham had a problem. His problem was no children, no heirs. How could he have many descendants when he had no children? Was the problem. So God makes an impossible God makes an impossible promise to Abraham to solve the problem. He said, "I'm going to give you a child, to you and to Sarah." And in case you're wondering how Abraham reacted to that, A rabbi later reflected on that as he wrote in the book of Romans. Against all hope, this is Romans 4, against all hope, Abraham faced the fact that his body was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old. Now, being a gracious gentleman as he was, the rabbi does not remind us how old Sarah was at this time. But he does say, and Sarah's womb was also dead. In other words, this was an impossible situation. But the text goes on to say he was persuaded that God had the power to provide what he had promised. In other words, that the Lord of the impossible was in fact the God who provides. And that's exactly who he was. And so God says, count the stars. Now that's interesting because it was just in the previous scene, remember, that Melchizedek called this God the creator of heaven and earth. So it would be important. Now, it would be appropriate for the God who is the creator to say, by the way, take a look, count the stars that I made. And that got the point across. And so it says in verse 6, and Abraham believed or trusted God. And God caused it to function, the English term is righteousness. It's as if he had placed into Abraham's account the status of righteousness. Basically what it's talking about is having a relationship that is right and ordered as far as God is concerned. There's all kinds of other ramifications for that term, but we don't have the time tonight to explore those. So, in verse 6 then, faith is also enough. He's got everything under control. Well, as you continue reading that story, Abraham indicates that he still needs a sign, he still needs evidence, something to hang on to, verse 8. And so what God does is he enacts a covenant-cutting ceremony, which in fact ratifies the covenant that God had made. And notice, in providing this for Abraham, God provided what Abraham needed. It was important for Abraham to have something solid to look back to. A quick aside on this. If you had something solid to look back to, doesn't that contradict faith? Well, I remind you of what the author wrote in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Often the English translates it, it's the substance of things hoped for, it's the evidence of things not seen. Interesting words. The words that are used there say, faith functions as the foundation, rock solid foundation, and it functions as evidence that can be, how should we put it? Both inspected and examined and found to be true. And so this then is the evidence that God leaves for Abraham and gives to Abraham. Something solid to look back to, because his faith and his friendship were about to be severely tested, which brings us then to Act 3, which is the climax of faith and friendship. The first scene begins with the birth of Ishmael in chapter 16. A child through Sarah was humanly impossible. But a child through Hagar, her servant, through Hagar and for Sarah, that was culturally acceptable. However, this is not what God had in mind. But God doesn't give up on those he's chosen. And he doesn't go back on his promises. He just keeps providing. Because he is known, as the text says later, as Adonai Yireh, the Lord who provides, the God who provides. So that brings us then to scene 2, the birth of Isaac. God once again makes the promise as the Lord of the impossible in chapter 17. And he confirms the covenant and its permanence. And in doing so, he gives them new names, Sarah and Abraham. This was more evidence than to remind them, to sharpen their focus and to strengthen their faith. So Abraham is called the father of nations. He will impact many nations. Sarah is called princess. In fact, that makes her the mother of nations and kings, as the text says. So every time they spoke their names, it was another evidence on which their faith could be built and strengthened. And then God, in keeping with names, he uses a definitive name for himself to give Abraham further courage, or new courage and confidence. He calls himself El Shaddai, often translated God Almighty, or God All-Powerful, or God All-Sufficient. When we have studied the names of God many years in the past, we came to understand that name means he's more than sufficient. And in this case, more than sufficient for every need. In other words, he has the power and the will to provide for us. God then personally gives additional affirmation. He provides the sign of circumcision. And he gives additional assurance as well as additional affirmation, more evidence for their faith. And he says, you will have a son through Sarah. By the name of, speaking of names, Isaac. Name which means laughter. Don't have the time to pursue that topic, which is a fun topic. Laughter, fun topic. You still with me? Okay. Thank you. I'm hearing laughter. Good. But when God first made that promise in chapter 18, he had to remind Abraham and Sarah that nothing, to quote him, is too impossible for the Lord of the impossible. And so we have a definition of faith illustrated for us here. We move from a reliance on ourselves. Abraham originally was trying to say, well, look, no kids, so as you heard earlier in the reading, Eliezer, my servant. Okay, that'll work. He's a faithful servant. Oh, that doesn't work? Okay, well, how about if we try it this way? Through Hagar. And then we got Ishmael. And God says, not quite what I had in mind, as suggested. It'll be through Isaac, one born through Sarah. And now it's as if Abraham says, now I got it. No longer relying on my own resources, but relying on God's resources. Well, that brings us to scene 3. The death of Isaac. Isaac was their pride and joy, their very life, the sign of hope and the seal of the promise. But he becomes the focus of an ultimate test. Look, family, profession, future, possessions, these are not ours, but they are in fact a trust from God. They're gifts entrusted to us, not rights or possessions of our own, or things that we have earned. So we must be willing to let them go. So, that gives us the question. I seem to be scraping against this. Pardon me while I try to get that further away so I don't keep hearing this. Nice kitty. All right. Where was I? Oh, who or what is your Isaac? Is the question that is opened up for us at this point in the story. What competes with God for first place in your life? What do you have, or what have you accomplished that competes with God for the meaning and priority in your life? What takes up your time or your money, or robs you of your time that should be devoted to God and his stuff? You see, false gods are not just idols found in pagan temples, but they are found in our homes, in our offices, in our schools, and in our hearts. God called Abraham to surrender his Isaac. And so the scene unfolds. And you can imagine Abraham going up to this place where he was supposed to sacrifice Isaac. It would take him right past or through, depending on how he was traveling, the Gihon Valley. Later becomes known as Gehinnom. It's the place where child sacrifice took place. And can you imagine Abraham is going on that journey? Either near or through the place where child sacrifice took place. And he knows what he's about to do. Well, anyhow, we have God's radical intervention in his life yet again. And not a moment too soon, nor for that matter, a moment too late. Perfectly timed. After all, he is Adonai Yireh, the God who provides. Abraham had taken the ultimate risk, and God was faithful to his promise. He provided. And as Abraham looked up after the angel stopped what he was about to do, he saw that God had provided a ram. Adonai Yireh is the Lord who will provide. But remember, he was already introduced to Abraham as El Shaddai, the God is more than sufficient for every need. So now theory turns into practice as Abraham follows through on God's test. And the result is the intervening majesty and might of God. And the result is also the answer to Abraham and what may have been his faltering faith. Or maybe it was more his faltering hope, whichever one it was. He had said, God, in answer to Isaac, God himself will provide a ram for the sacrifice. And he did. Faith is the unswerving confidence that God is our friend and will in fact provide at just the right moment. And that's the kind of faith that Abraham had developed, and Sarah along with him. Interestingly enough, the place where all this took place is identified as Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is later identified with Jerusalem. Interestingly enough, Jerusalem, Yeru Shalem, Adonai Yireh, the one who provides peace. It reinforces the lesson. And by the way, a short distance away, within easy view, was another mountain. It was called Golgotha. It became later known as Calvary. Which reminds me to share with you a couple of the traditions that, although not widespread, are nevertheless definitely there in Judaism. One of those traditions is that Isaac actually died. And he was resurrected. Another part of the tradition is some of the rabbis of old reflected in this way, that Isaac's sacrifice would in some way be accepted on behalf of all the Jewish people. Oh, by the way, that particular text that we're reading, that I just referenced, where do we read it during the holidays? Rosh Hashanah, in preparation for Yom Kippur, and the reminder of God's atonement. And the picture of that atonement here. Well, anyhow, lessons for tonight. The Lord created us to be his friends, and in fact, Yeshua remarks on this, and he says, "You are my friends," John 15. And he wants us to be his friends, and to grow and to know and to love and trust him, like Abraham did. Friendship encourages trust, and trust, our faith, is essential to friendship. The essence of that faith, well, it's twofold. To trust God to provide what we need, and Isaac when we have none. And this then enables, how should I put it, a willingness to risk. But we can dare to risk. We can know that God loves our Isaacs much more than we, in fact, do. Because God is for us, he's not against us. He doesn't want, in other words, a religious sacrifice of our Isaac, but he wants the undeserved surrender of our control over, or our clinging to, whatever that Isaac is in our lives. You see, the adventure of friendship with God is surrendering control of what we were never meant to control. We're supposed to let loose of what is not ours in order to gain what we cannot lose. So Abraham gave to God his Isaac, his future, his destiny. And once again, God proved himself to be Adonai Yireh, the God who provides. And so God, in return, gave Isaac back as a gift and as an assurance that he loved him and that he believed in Abraham's future even more so than Abraham did. And that he wants to continue to provide for Abraham, but also for us. We too can have the firm conviction that God will provide, that he is Adonai Yireh. Look, Abraham believed God would intervene and would provide somehow. He just didn't know how. Here's what he said. He said to his servants, I and the lad, by the way, the lad. Many scholars believe this lad was in excess of 30 years old. Okay, so keep that in mind as you think through this whole story. He said, we'll go up to the mountain, and he says, we will return. That was Abraham's confidence that God would intervene, because he had throughout his life. And which is why Hebrews chapter 11, verses 17 to 19 reminds us that Abraham considered Isaac as good as dead, but he believed that God would raise him from the dead because this was the one through whom the promise would be fulfilled. There was no other way he could have gone through that ordeal. When we entrust our Isaac and ourselves to God, we can be sure he will provide the way through and out of our difficulties. We can face anything because the Lord of radical intervention. The Lord of radical intervention is epitomized at those mountains, not only Moriah, but also Golgotha, but also in a place called Bethlehem, as well as the garden gravesite. The Lord of radical intervention, at the right time, will in fact resurrect all the impossibilities we've surrendered to him. Which leaves us then with the question, so what's your response? Response should be, give him complete control of your life, your Isaac, your future. Ask God for a sense, a vision of his will, which would be impossible to do without his help and without his provisions. As an expression of unreserved faith, dare to risk the impossible as he guides. And then fly the flag, Adonai Yireh, the Lord will provide. Because the ultimate reality of the story of Abraham is the Lord of the impossible will do just that. He is the God who provides. Take some time, a bit of time, in quiet reflection in response. And even though it may seem impossible, the Lord of the impossible will provide. And we anticipate his provision as we rise now. And anticipate through the Elaine, the time when all false gods will be in an end, and the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. The time of the kingdom of David's greater son. We face Jerusalem, which will be the center of all that activity. We respond on pages 102 to 107. Before we begin, let me remind you, there's only one line during which we bow. All right? If you don't know which line it is, keep your eye on the cantor. When he bows, you bow. And when he's done bowing, you're done bowing. Fair enough? Good. Richard.
Aleinu shebeach la'adon ha'kol, v'atekilu la leyoser bereshit. ולא עשינו תולדות הרעשות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, ונור עלינו כחל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אלון, את מלכנו, את סגולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום בהשבותה. אל לבביך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for He has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs, our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like Him. For He stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. There is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's great Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled. The Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shamo
You may be seated. As we move to the last part of the service, just a reminder, not 3 reminders, but 4. Forget about the clock going back long. Second, this is a time where if we have any first-time visitors and you feel comfortable telling us who you are, we ask you to stand, give us your name, where you're from, and just as quickly sit right back down, and then we'll talk to you later, unless you sneak out. Then comes a time for we as a family to not only take note of visitors so we can welcome them, but also to share with one another matters that might be urgent for which we would ask the family to pray. Matters or people. And then to end in an upbeat note, share the kind of stuff that we can say thank you to God for. In all those cases, we keep it brief.
Anybody want to introduce themselves or someone else? Hi.
My name is Susan, and I'm from New Jersey, and I moved to Florida in June, and then I live across the street from Keeney, and she brought me with her today.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We have many Northeasterners here. Anybody else? All right, what are our concerns this week? What are we concerned about? Remembering, we're going to abide by all HIPAA regulations. Okay, yes,
I would like you to pray for my friend Susan. Has some extreme health problems
Okay.
that she's going through.
all right, we will pray about that. Anybody else? I think it's really great to consciously realize that if I asked that like 4 months ago, we had a list of people we were praying for, but thank God they all seem to be basically up and around. Yeah, life's good. If you feel good enough to be here, you feel good enough. Okay, any sort of sad news? Then let's flip the other side and go to a little bit of bragging or good reports. Yes,
I got everything tonight.
she does.
My 9-year-old grandson fell 2 stories off the top of a bounce house, and he only broke his wrist.
Okay, well,
So that's,
and what, was this recently or?
yes,
So-
last week, Thanksgiving Day.
I cannot imagine. That would, yikes. Okay, well then, we'll pray for him too though. Is he getting used to,
Oh, he loves his cast.
he loves his cast, yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Oh, Adam, no, you gotta watch those kids named Adam. Anything else, any other good news or money, good news, what, yeah?
It's great to see some friends back in town after a long time, sitting in this back row.
Yeah, it is nice to have you guys. And it's nice to be ahead, probably. Boy, you were quiet. You're all exhausted and just overwhelmed by all your holiday cheer, yeah?
My daughter, Bailey, turns 19 in a week. She's been doing drama and theater since she was in the 1st grade. And she finally got her lead role, first lead role in a play. I think she's been in about a dozen plays. And she's finally gotten a lead part. So I'm
And
very
it would
proud of her.
be,
The play is not exactly religiously themed. It's cabaret.
come on, you have to be really something to play is she playing Sally Bowles?
She is.
All power to her. That's a great part. That's a great part. It's just the costume you might have a little problem with. Where is it gonna be held?
Front row, her dad in the front row, cabaret.
Yeah, let's not do that to her.
It'll be a test of my faith, like Abraham.
No, you need to be in the back and not paying attention. Speaking as a daughter. And where is it gonna be?
It's going to be the Suncoast Theater in Newport Richey.
Oh,
It's private theater.
Let us know, because that would be great to see her. That'd be,
Love to invite you.
cabaret is the kind, it is really for it's an adult show, but she's 19, she knows all the words. She knows,
Well, it's a Holocaust theme
Yes.
at the end of it.
it's a very,
It has a very somber end. So
very somber, and it's a very weighty, as a musical, it has many very weighty lessons in it.
being, Jewish, she understands how important it is. She
And-
told me she understands that important theme in the play.
And maybe she can share with other people in the play too, because some people don't understand it. That is good news though. And doesn't have to be too braggy. No? You guys are quiet, and I'm suspicious. I'm gonna pray that exciting things happen to you this week. Oh my gosh, I got a big no over here. Yeah.
No, well, I got a new lizard.
Well,
I rescued it.
did you really? Nice.
Yeah.
A new member of the family.
A new member of the family.
How many critters live at your house? Do you mind sharing?
Well, right now we only have 2, but that will soon be changing. That's
Oh,
because the new lizard needs a mate.
well, obviously. Well, bless your heart. Okay, sometimes it's nice to just have a week, right? Let's pray. Avinu Malchenu, our Father and our King, you are a great God, and it is a privilege to serve you. I thank you, Father, for our congregation. I pray that you would continue to be with us, to help us feel that you're accompanying us. Father, we look to you for good lessons during the week. We look to you to show us people we can reach out to who need something that we can talk them through, or we can perhaps provide. Help us to be sensitive and share your love around us to whoever it might be that might need it that moment. Continue to bless us. Thank you for watching over those people who've been traveling and those who will continue to travel over the holidays. Father, we pray that you would protect our people in your great love. And so we are saying thank you for the past week, and we look forward to the coming week. And knowing that we can depend on you for the big things and the small things. We are very, very grateful. B'Shem Yeshua, Meshachenu, in the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.
As Patrice pointed out, not too long ago, we would have had a whole list of things to be praying for. It's a reminder that God is a God who answers prayer. It's a reminder that we reinforce in our daily prayers when we respond. Shema koleinu Eloheinu, Husvarachem aleinu, Vekabel barakamin tafilatenu, Baruch atah shamei tefillah. Hear our voice, Lord our God. Spare us and have mercy on us. Receive in mercy and favor our prayer, because you are a God who hears prayer and supplication. Blessed are you, O Lord. You're the God who hears prayer. And for that we're grateful, and we're grateful for all the opportunities he gives us, for the seasons we get to celebrate. And so please keep in mind then that we do have on the back table, if you have need of it, guide for the celebration of Rishon, as well as the lights of Hanukkah. Take advantage of that. Tomorrow morning we do have a less formal time of get-together. And then again, as you'll notice, the 28th of the month. Please also note that since we have a Hanukkah party, we will not be having a game night in Havdalah in the month of December. And then, of course, please make note of that said Hanukkah party and join us for that. I am told that all the rooms for the retreat have been filled. However, there's always campsites available, and we'll be happy to start a waiting list in case somebody has to drop out at the last minute. So if you're interested in that, let us know. And then, of course, take advantage of the courses that are being offered next semester. The information for signing up is found there in one of the inserts. That being said, we're continually reminded that we have a God who reaches out to us. And as he blessed Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, so he wants to bless us too. And so we stand ready to receive those blessings as he extends those blessings to us, as Richard comes to lead us in receiving those blessings.
Our God and God of our fathers, bless us with the threefold blessing. Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu, Barachenu v'Baracha HaMashiach Shem. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichu necha. Adonai panav elecha bless you and watch over you. May the Lord cause the light of his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you with favor, and may he grant you peace. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.